Lee opened. A single dad sheltered an elderly woman. He never expected her billionaire daughter to change his life. The rain hadn't let up in 3 hours. Lee opened, and Marcus Rayleigh was exhausted in the particular way that only single fathers who work double shifts understand, bone deep, the kind of tired that settles behind your eyes and doesn't leave even after you close them. Lee opened. He was driving home from the auto shop, his hands stiff on the wheel, thinking about the stack of unpaid bills on his kitchen counter and whether he'd have enough left after this week to buy Lily the winter boots she needed. Lee opened. If this story moves you even a little, stay with me until the end. And if you believe in kindness finding its way back to good people, hit subscribe because there's a lot more heart where this came from. That's when he saw her. Lee opened. An elderly woman sat alone on a bus stop bench, soaked to the bone, a small suitcase clutched against her chest like it was the only thing tethering her to the world. Lee opened. The bus that used to stop there hadn't run in over a year. The route had been cut when the county slashed its transit budget, but nobody had bothered to take down the sign, and clearly nobody had told her. Marcus almost drove past. Lee opened. He told himself later that he almost did, where he kept driving home to relieve the babysitter and never thought about that woman again. But something about the way she sat, small, still, Lee opened, resigned, made him pull over. He called out, rolling down his window. She looked up slowly, blinking against the rain. Her eyes were pale blue, clouded with a foggy uncertainty. "I'm waiting for the bus." Lee opened. She said, her voice thin. "There's no bus coming tonight," Marcus said gently. "Not for a long while, I'm afraid. Do you have someone I can call for you?" She didn't answer right away. Lee opened. Her hands trembled around the handle of her suitcase, and Marcus realized that she genuinely didn't know where to go. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore. That much she could tell him. Beyond that, Lee opened. She mentioned a daughter, and then took it back. Said she didn't have anyone, then mentioned a house that wasn't hers anymore. Marcus didn't push. Lee opened. He'd learned enough about people in his 41 years to know that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is not ask why, just help. He drove her to his house instead of the hospital. Lee opened, and mostly because something in his chest told him she needed warmth and a bed more than she needed a waiting room full of strangers. Lily, his 8-year-old daughter, was still awake when they arrived. Lee opened, curled up on the couch with her one-eared stuffed rabbit, waiting for her babysitter to leave. "Daddy, who's that?" Lily whisked. Marcus helped Eleanor through the door. "A friend who needs somewhere warm to stay tonight." Lee opened. "Sweetheart," Marcus said. He, wrapped late wife, had been knitted before she passed 3 years earlier, and set her up on the couch with a cup of tea. Lily, unprompted, Lee opened, brought Eleanor, she said solemnly. "He helps when you're scared." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she took the worn little toy in her frail hands. "Thank you, dear," she whispered. Lee opened. "I think I need buttons tonight." That was supposed to be the end of it. And in the morning, Marcus figured he'd help her get to a shelter or contact social services, do the responsible thing. Lee opened, and get back to the grinding routine of single fatherhood. But mornings have a way of complicating the simplest plans. At breakfast, while Lily ate cereal and chattered about her class hamster, Lee opened. Marcus noticed Eleanor staring at an old photograph she'd pulled from her suitcase. It showed a much younger girl standing beside Tina in a dress gown, both of them laughing. "That's my daughter," Eleanor said quietly. Lee opened, not looking up. "Catherine. She's very successful now. I haven't spoken to her in 12 years. 12 years is a long time," Marcus said carefully, sitting down across from her. Lee opened. "She wanted me to move into one of her properties. Very nice, very expensive. I told her I'd away somewhere with a schedule for my meals, then be filed away somewhere with a schedule for my meals." Lee opened. Eleanor's hands shook slightly around her mug. "We said things to each other that day that neither of us should have said." I haven't heard her voice since. "What happened to your house?" "The bank happened," Eleanor said. Lee opened, a bitter edge creeping into her voice. "I made some mistakes with money, after my husband passed, signed things I shouldn't have. By the time I understood what was happening, it was already gone. Opened. I didn't want to call Catherine and admit I was homeless. I couldn't bear for her to be right about me needing help. Marcus sat with that for a long moment, feeling the particular ache of recognizing another person's pride. Opened, because he understood it. Pride had kept him from asking his own parents for help more times than he could count, even when the electricity bill loomed and Lily needed new shoes. He could have called social services that morning. Opened, part of him almost did. But watching Eleanor's hands cradle that photograph, watching the way Lily had already claimed her as a new favorite person to talk to over breakfast, Marcus made a decision that would reshape all of their lives. Opened, just until we figure something out. I don't have much, but I've got a spare room and enough food to share. Eleanor's protests were weak and half-hearted. Opened, the kind that come from someone who desperately wants to be talked into staying. Within a week, Eleanor had become a fixture in the Riley household. She walked Lily to the bus stop each morning. Schultz, the boar to the boar, opened, told her stories about growing up on a farm in Kentucky, and in the evenings struggled to focus on after 12-hour shifts. It wasn't charity. Not really. Not after the first few days. Opened, it became something closer to family. Eleanor mended the hole in Lily's favorite shirtwater. Marcus fixed the ancient rocking chair Eleanor had brought in her suitcase, the one thing she'd managed to keep from her old life. Opened, Lily started calling her Grandma Ellie without anyone suggesting it, and Eleanor cried the first time she heard it, though she pretended it was dust in her eye. 3 weeks into this new, unplanned arrangement, opened, a black car pulled up outside the modest house on Cedar Street, the kind of car that didn't belong on a street where half the houses needed new roofs. Marcus was in the driveway fixing a gutter when a woman stepped out. Opened, dressed in a tailored coat that probably cost more than his truck, sharp eyes scanning the house with an expression somewhere between disbelief and dread. "I'm looking for Eleanor Whitmore," the woman said. Opened, "I was told she might be here." Marcus climbed down from the ladder slowly. "Catherine Whitmore Hale. I'm her daughter." The name hit differently once Marcus placed it. Whitmore Hale. Opened, the name behind half the pharmaceutical distribution centers in 3 states, occasionally appeared in the business the newspaper his father used to read. He hadn't put it together in that moment. He hadn't put it together until that moment. Opened, "She's inside," Marcus said carefully. "She's safe. She's been safe." Catherine's composure cracked, just slightly, at the word safe. "I hired 3 private investigators. I've been searching for 2 months." Opened, "When her house went into foreclosure, I thought the worst." Her voice caught. "Nobody would tell me anything because I wasn't listed as her emergency contact. We hadn't spoken. That's my fault. I know that." Opened, Marcus led her inside, where helping Lily with a puzzle. The moment Eleanor saw her daughter standing in the doorway, the puzzle piece slipped from her fingers. "Mom," Catherine whispered. Opened, and 12 years of silence, single trembling word. What followed wasn't a Hollywood reconciliation. It was messier and more honest than that. There was crying, yes, but there was also anger. Opened, Catherine admitted she'd been too proud and too busy to check on her mother properly, hiding behind business trips and board meetings instead of picking up the phone. Opened, Eleanor admitted she'd been too stubborn to accept help even when she desperately needed it, and too ashamed to call her daughter when everything fell apart. Opened, they talked for hours that afternoon while Mark took Lily out back to give them privacy, tossing a ball in the yard as autumn leaves drifted down around them. When Catherine finally emerged, opened, her eyes red but her posture straighter, she found Marcus in the driveway again. "You took in a stranger with nothing to give her a home. You gave her a home. You gave her back to me." Opened, "I didn't do it to get anything. Mark's a right thing to do. You don't owe me anything." "Catherine, exactly why I'm going to insist on it any moment. That's exactly why I'm going to insist on it anyway." Opened. Over the following weeks, Catherine didn't offer Marcus a check and disappear, which was what he'd half expected and quietly dreaded, being paid off and thanked out of a story that had never been about money for him. Instead, Lee opened, she kept coming back. She helped set Eleanor up with proper medical care to address the early loss that rainy night that had contributed to her getting Eleanor's house. She paid off the debts that had swallowed Eleanor's house. Lee opened, though Eleanor insisted on moving into a small cottage nearby rather than back to the empty property, wanting to stay close to Marcus, Lily, and Buttons the one-eared rabbit. For Marcus, Lee opened, Catherine quietly paid off the medical debt still lingering from his wife's illness, debt he'd been chipping away at for 3 years, without telling anyone how much it weighed on him. Lee opened, she helped him enroll in a certification program he'd always wanted to pursue but never had the money or time for. She didn't do it as a transaction. She did it, she said, Lee opened, because some kindness deserves to be met with more than just a thank you. Lily got a grandmother she adored, and a stability she hadn't fully realized was missing since her mother passed. Eleanor got her daughter back, Lee opened, and a family that had chosen her, not because of blood, but because of a rainy night and an empty bus stop bench. Catherine got a second chance to be present in her mother's life, and an unexpected friendship with a tired, Lee opened, big-hearted mechanic who'd taught her more about generosity in one conversation than any business school ever had. Marcus got something he hadn't let himself hope for since his wife passed. A full house again, laughter in the evenings, Lee opened, and the quiet knowledge that doing the right thing, even when it costs you something, has a way of finding its way back around. Months later, pour a crisp we were glowing with the porch light glowing warm against the darkly opened. Eleanor sat in her mended rocking chair on Marcus's porch, Lily on her lap listening to a story about the Kinkakfi. Catherine beside them with 2 mugs of coffee, and Marcus leaning against the railing, watching it all with a quietly opened, grateful smile. You know, Eleanor said, locking up night on the bench, I thought I had nothing left. No home, no daughter, nothing. And then a tired man in a beat-up truck stopped for no reason at all. Lee opened. There was a reason, Marcus said softly. If this story touched your heart even a little, let us know in the comments. What would you have done if you saw Eleanor on that bench? Lee opened. And if you believe kindness always finds its way home, don't forget to subscribe, because there are so many more stories like this one still to tell.